All right, good morning. Hope everybody is doing well this morning. If you will, go ahead and stand. We got quiet in here really quick. If you'll go ahead and stand, and we'll get started. Sing this out. Great is your faithfulness.
Great is your faithfulness, O God. You wrestle with the sinner's restless heart. You lead us by still waters into mercy, and nothing can keep us apart. Your grace is enough for me. Your grace is enough. Heaven reaches out to us. Your grace is enough for me. God, I sing, your grace is enough. I'm covered in your love. Your grace is enough for me, for me. rescue, and I wanna be where you are. And I called, you answered, and you came to my rescue, and I wanna be where you are. In my life, be lifted high in our world, be lifted high in our love, be lifted high. In my life, be lifted high in our world, be lifted high in our love, be lifted high. In my life, be lifted high in our world, be lifted high in our love, be lifted high. And I called, you answered, and you came to my rescue, and I wanna be where you are.
You guys may be seated. Let's have a word of prayer. God, we thank you so much once again for another beautiful day that you have given us to serve you and to worship you for who you are. God, I pray that as we go throughout our days, that we're constantly mindful of your grace, and that your grace is enough for us. So thankful for that and for the new mercy that you give us every day. I pray for the rest of the service this morning, for the message that's brought, that it would impact our lives as we continue to think on what was taught yesterday. And I just pray that you would use it to impact, to change our lives, all for your honor and glory. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Well, good morning. And I am looking forward to getting into the material again this morning, and I'm going to change pace just a little bit from what I described yesterday, and certainly depart from the approach we took yesterday. And that is because I want to make sure we get time to cover the very practical things. I got a lot of good feedback, a lot of questions. By the way, some of your questions that you wrote me are very specific, very personal, and those will take some follow-up, especially some of the specific questions that contain questions. So I'll try to get to some of those in emails and so forth, but some of the more broad, general questions I'll try to cover today. But be thinking about other questions that you want to ask when we get to that point. So what I'm going to do today is put the practical stuff, the tools, and the Q&A time first, and then if we have time at the end, we'll cover some more of the principles of the 10 that we presented in summary yesterday. But if time doesn't allow us to get through all of those principles, I'll email all of that out. You can read through those points. It's not profound, as I mentioned yesterday, as far as difficult to understand. And you can work your way through those verses. You can work your way through the points on your own time and make that a study. I encourage you to do that. So I want to take advantage of the time that we have together to interact. And then you can follow up again with more emails would be great. Some people have already stopped by to see me, and you're maybe talking to other people as well. I hope that's what you'll do, is that you'll start conversations with people who you can trust, who you can ask advice, people that have been there, done that, and solicit their input. I talked to some folks again this morning who were saying, I wish I would have done some of these things earlier in life. I wish I would have talked to someone and not just pursued those decisions on my own. So if nothing else comes out of all of this, I hope that that's a result of all of this. And when I talk about some of these numbers, I don't want to scare you when it comes to money, but I would like you to be scared to death of not being on a plan. You follow me? Don't be scared of financial issues like how do I buy insurance and but be scared of not planning for those things. Be scared of just going at it without any approach or just hoping things are going to work out. Now, we sang in the song, the first song, God's grace is enough. It is. Matthew 6 changed my life. As I was reading that one night, 2 o'clock in the morning at the camp, the Wilds, many of you are familiar with that. As I was reading through that, it was very clear to me what God wanted me to do with my life and go into full-time ministry in whatever shape. I didn't understand exactly what that was going to be at the time. But in Matthew 6, he says what? He cares for the birds. He cares for the lilies. He cares for the grass. Won't He care for you if you'll put Him first in your life? His grace is enough. But that does not mean we just sit back and not plan for these things and use the God-given abilities and brains that He has equipped us with to be good stewards. And that takes us into the points that we started with as foundational points yesterday. Fundamental principles. Probably didn't turn this on. I'll let Rick come fix this in just a minute. Fundamental principles. God owns everything, and man is His steward. And again, Matthew 6, His grace is enough, but He expects us to be stewards of those things. And then, if that's true, man's heart towards God is revealed in his stewardship. We covered the first 4 points yesterday. Today, we might get to 5 through 10. If we don't, that's okay. And again, I'll email those things to you. But we're going to start with point number 5 today as we move. By the way, before I forget, I have a note here to say hi to my sons, Ben and Daniel. They were really thrilled yesterday that I even mentioned them. So I'm going to call them by name today. Ben is 7, Daniel is 5. And we are already trying to teach them money principles. In fact, we've already identified that Ben is our saver. The other day he wanted to buy something. We were like, son, you don't have money for that. He's like, yes, I do. We're like, no, you don't. Yes, I do. We got home. He had way more than that, hidden in different places throughout the house. Pretty interesting. He's 7. Daniel, on the other hand, if he gets $1, he wants to go to Family Christian and buy the latest VeggieTale, whatever it is. So you're going to have spenders and savers in your family, in your relationship, and maybe in the husband and wife, one of you is going to be a saver, one of you is going to be a spender. Figure those things out and work that into your plan as you seek counsel and so forth. All right, point number 5, avoid the big score. This is avoiding that, if I can just get rich really quick through this scheme or this plan that somebody's talked to me about, or this, if I buy into this multi-level marketing thing, I'll suddenly be wealthy and I won't have to work again. Sometimes those things work. But my experience has been, by watching people pursue those things, and I won't give you specifics today, just in case somebody is watching or comes across this video later, but I've seen families ruined. A very good friend of mine lost his first wife in the pursuit of the dollar. And he thought he would make it rich very quickly. He thought many of us were crazy for even pursuing college and doing other things because his plan was going to take care of him, set him for life. He's doing very well today, but it was a very hard road because of the decisions he made to pursue that. The get rich schemes or get rich quick schemes typically do not pan out. There are success stories, but they are the rare exceptions. And making this your goal will cause you to shift your focus from the Lord and from service to Him and put the focus where it should not be. It's out of balance, as we talked about yesterday. Proverbs 13:11 says, dishonest money dwindles away, but he who gathers money little by little makes it grow. Again, sometimes you can find even a good model. Maybe you have this great idea, you invented something that's going to solve everybody's problems and you can sell it and you get wealthy very quickly. That's great. But typically the principle is grow it very slowly, little by little. And we'll see how that works in just a minute mathematically. Problems with the get-rich-quick plan, it's difficult to convince yourself that it's not difficult, to convince yourself that the end justifies the means. The things I'm going to do now, the corners that I'm going to cut are okay because I'm working towards something greater. And that particular friend that I mentioned a while ago, he justified lots of the things that he was doing. He justified it by saying he was going to fund missionaries and fund churches and so forth with the millions he was going to make. But in the process, I believe, and evidence is clear that it became idolatry in his life. Number 2, the bankrupt lottery winner principle. We ought to think about that. Are you familiar with this at all? Have you ever seen these documentaries about people who win the lottery? They come out of poverty, they suddenly win millions. What happens? Anybody know? This is interactive, remember? What happens?
End up worse.
They end up worse. How? In what kind of ways?
They think that the money will never run out.
And it does. So they end up worse financially, but is that it? You know what? They end up in divorce and alienated from their children. And all those cousins and second cousins and third cousins that came calling when they won the lottery that, oh, hey, you were my best friend, remember? Once you're out of money, gone. And there's hurt and there's damage. So be careful. Is that really what you want? Do you want that to happen? So don't be careful what you ask for, I guess is the point. Whoop, let's back up. Point 3, slow but sure wins the race. Wisdom from the tortoise. Now, let's talk about how that really looks. I'm going to show you again some tools. And let's see if I can get it right the first time. Hey, look, I did it. All right, lifetime savings calculator. Here's where I told you yesterday somebody needed to volunteer. And I told you how we walked through a volunteer's example one time in a math class, and he literally fell out of his chair. Tyler Galden. Some of you remember him as a student. You can talk to him about that, his Chick-fil-A habit. Somebody give me an illustration in your life where you do something on a regular basis, daily, 5 times a week, 3 or 4 times a month, something that you could give up that cost money, that you could either give it up entirely or you could substitute it for something else. For example, Tyler's example was he went to Chick-fil-A most every day and bought a breakfast combo, and he could have substituted cereal in the morning for that. So give me some kind of example that somebody's willing to say, this is really my life, this is what I do. Starbucks. Are you gonna give me the numbers? All right, you see my first question before you volunteer, April. Your age now? Yes, 42. All right. Your age at retirement, I'm going to plug that in at 70. And hang on just a second. Your age expectancy. All right, we're going to go with 90. Just so you know, you're going to die at 90. Normal market price. Tell me how much you pay for your Starbucks. Woo! What? All right. The next point, and by the way, this is another calculator I'll email you after we cover this today. The price you would pay after if you use coupons or discounts or just quit buying it or bought something different or made coffee at home, tell me what that price would be. So giving up coffee? All right, if you make it home, it's going to cost you, even a K-cup would be like 50 cents, right? Let's do 50 cents. Let's just say you're going to splurge and do the K-cup thing. How many times during the month would you do this? Yeah, like how many times a month do you buy Starbucks right now? And you could substitute it for something else. Like 30 days a month, or you just do it on weekdays? Let's give you the benefit of the doubt. Let's do weekdays. 20 times a month. All right? Now, at age 42, planning to retire at 70, you're going to live till 90. You're going to give up this. We've plugged in all the numbers. You see here that her savings per month is $147. You see that middle way down? Savings per year, $1,700. But look what happens as we scroll on down here. If we invest that money at 6%, by the time she retires, you would have an expected value of $121,000, which would throw off, look at that, monthly income, the very last number, would throw off $880 a month in retirement income. But let me show you something. If you made that change in your life when you were 20 years old, you see what happened to that number just now? $513,000. By making that change on the weekdays only, making that change from Starbucks to make it at home coffee at the age of 20, that could change your life. Let me click somewhere where I can scroll. $3,731 monthly income in your retirement days. Now that is assuming that you're going to invest that money or increase your retirement contribution and earn at least 6%. The average mutual funds, if you find a good safe mutual fund, as I mentioned yesterday, you can earn 7%, 8%, sometimes 10%. So let's just change that number one time. Let's say I can make 10% on that money. $2 million at the age of retirement, $20,000 per month of income. Listen, retirement is possible. accumulating something that you can use. Now, this is not so you can, live the lifestyle of the rich and famous. I hope that's not what your goal is. But imagine what you could do for the Lord and increase your giving and increase your ability to serve Him in capacities that you would have to turn down otherwise if you had the resources available to you, because you planned ahead of time and you made changes in your life, little changes of giving up coffee, giving up the chicken biscuit, giving up, and I'm talking small changes. And you can do this calculation on your own. I encourage you to think through, especially if you're planning to get married. Sit down with your fiancé or some, and go through these calculations of little things you could change. What if I shopped at Walmart instead of shopping at the name brand store for my clothes? And plug those things in. How often do you do that? 2 or 3 times a month. And start running the numbers, because what I hear most of the time when somebody comes and asks for advice, they say, I just don't have any money to set aside for retirement. There's nothing left at the end of the month. But I hope you see that it's worth making that little bit of sacrifice here and there, and it adds up in huge ways. If you start young, it adds up in huge ways. So let me illustrate that by going back to our PowerPoint. And I'm going to put a slide on the screen that Dr. Pitcher actually sent me the link to yesterday after we discussed things. If I can use this computer. All right, can you see that? Saving early compared with saving later. Smart saver on the left starts saving at the age of 20. They stop saving at the age of 30, so they only spend 10 years setting aside money. They set aside $3,000 a year. They do nothing from the age of 30 to the age of 60. At age 60, they have $472,000 saved because they invested it and earned about 8% in a good solid mutual fund or multiple mutual funds. Retirement years, they can withdraw $42,000 a year until the age of 90 and still have money. And they only saved for 10 years. If another person waits until they're 30 years old, they have to save until they're 60, which means they've saved up, they've spent a lot more time setting that money aside on a monthly basis, same amount of money, $3,000 a year, but they have to do it from age of 30 to 60, and they still only come out with $42,000 of annual income, and it lasts them only 15 years until the age of 75. Do you see that? By waiting 10 years, it changes everything. When should you start? Now is the word you probably want to use. Now, does that mean you ought to have a full portfolio before you've graduated? Probably not. But I am saying start the day after graduation if you can't start while you're in school, or start very quickly. And that might mean getting rid of the debt first. If you're in debt, you ought to address that first before you start saving a lot of this towards retirement. But if you'll attack that debt first, as we mentioned yesterday, that shadow you're standing in, if you make the shadow smaller and eventually get out of that shadow, now you can start doing these kind of things and do it soon. Do it early. Let me show you another chart, and then we'll get to some Q&As. I guess I can click it this way, can I? This is someone starting to save at age 25 versus age 35. Again, a 10-year difference. Whatever the amount is they're putting aside, it's the same amount every month, but look at the difference. At the age of 65, Dave, who started 10 years later, has half the money that Emily would have had by just starting in that 10-year difference. So it takes double the amount of money, or it's costing you double the amount of money to wait 10 more years to get started. And that's the risk you run when you get out of college. You say, well, I've got to do this first, and I've got to do that first. And when I really want to get here, and I really have these goals, and we really want to travel some, we really want to go on this cruise, those are decisions that can cost you exponentially when you put it in a chart like this and calculate how that affects your life long term. Okay? 2 resources I want to mention up here, and then I'm going to work through the questions. But go ahead and write these down if you're taking notes. Type this in your phone, save this, something. But one of the most common questions I get, and some of you already emailed me about talking about budgets, and I want to do that here this morning. But these are 2 free tools that you can get to. You only need one of the 2. You can look at them and decide. One of those tools is mint.com. It's totally free of charge. It's made by Quicken, the people who make QuickBooks and so forth. And it is an online cloud-based solution that you can connect all your bank accounts to, your debt, your student loans, your credit cards, You can put it all in here and it connects, and then it updates itself automatically. And then you just log in and check, and it gives you this nice snapshot of everything you've got and everything you owe. And it helps you. You can set up budgets. You can set up plans to address those things. You can track your dollars. And here's one of the best things you can do when it comes to budgeting is track every single dollar and see where it went. And then start planning next month for where every single dollar is going to go before the month gets here. A tool like this will allow you to get started easier than you think. You don't have to be an accountant. You don't have to hire an accounting firm to track your money. Plug it into one of these. The second one is everydollar.com. That's the newest one. I'm not that familiar. I haven't started using it yet, so I want to be careful of my recommendation here, but it is put out by Dave Ramsey's group, Ramsey Solutions. It's somewhat new, but I think they've worked out all their bugs. And both of these, by the way, they work on apps. You can track this on your phone. If you're married or you're planning to get married, you can do what my wife and I did. She can look at the same thing on her iPad, or I'm looking on my iPhone or on the website, and we can see who's doing what and where the money's going. We can attach categories to those spending levels. We can, again, budget and track those things and be on the same page together. That's one of the things you want to make sure you're doing when it comes to budgeting in a relationship, or when you're married especially. You want to be on the same page, making those decisions together, making sure you're sharing that information, and make sure you're in agreement is the bottom line. Now, let me jump to a question that someone sent me who asked about retirement. And again, I won't read a lot of the ones that were sent because they were very personal or very specific. But Catherine Schoaf, is Catherine here? Catherine, thank you, said, I would like to know what type of investment account you recommend for a college student to start. Traditional IRA, Roth IRA, etc. That's a really good question. Let me start first by talking a little bit about retirement. We, in our circles and in ministry training, sometimes believe the wrong thing about planning for the future in retirement. And a lot of times there's good intentions behind that. And I'm going to illustrate this with an example. A pastor that I knew very well growing up had this mentality because he was taught this when he was in Bible college, to be honest with you. And all of his friends believe the same way. We're not going to save for the future. Jesus is probably coming back before we get there anyway. And we trust Him. We're going to live by faith. And I'm going to preach till I die anyway. I don't need to set aside any money. Whatever I've got now, I need to spend it or use it for His glory. Spend it, give it to missions. Okay? That all sounds great. I'm going to live by faith, preach till I die. Right? The problem is that he preached until he was in a car accident that left him handicapped, unable to preach, unable to pastor a church. He had no Social Security because he had opted out. He had no savings, no retirement. And he had a spouse who is still alive. He's been dead for about 10 years, but he went about 10 years without the ability to work. So that's 20 years now with a spouse who did not have income of her own, who was not being taken care of. There was no life insurance that I'm aware of. And they ended up in a very, very bad situation because he said, I'm going to preach till I die. We don't know our future. God has given us the ability to think and to plan and to follow His principles. And we saw that the ant principle applies. Work and save while you can for the day ahead that you don't know what's going to happen. And if you plan and you overplan and you have surplus in the days of retirement, then that's when you can do things that are amazing to help people. And now you want to be doing that all along, don't get me wrong. But we ought to be planning. We shouldn't neglect retirement by justifying it by saying, I'm just going to trust the Lord for those things later. He wants you to plan. He wants you to start now. So what should I do if I'm a college student? I would say, and if anybody else wants to speak up, please do so. I would say while you're a college student, I wouldn't worry too much about setting up that retirement account. I would get into the habit of saving money. Get a savings account at a bank, especially if we're talking about just a few $1,000s at most over the next few years. Put that aside into a savings account. That savings account will be there when you graduate. That could be used for a down payment on a house or an emergency fund or your wedding to avoid some of those things that people go into debt for right after college. So I would do that first and not set up an IRA or a 401k or something like that while you're in college. I would feel differently if you're working a job where they're offering you a match. And by that I mean a lot of your companies you're going to work for one day will match a portion of what you set aside out of your paycheck for retirement. If you work somewhere like that and they say everything up to 5% of your income will match it, then do that. Because here's what happens. 7 and 8% returns that I'm talking about, that's pretty good. But when a company matches, that's 100% return. In other words, if I take out $30 towards retirement, they put 30, I just doubled my money. So that's really crazy not to do that. If you work somewhere that matches, you do that first. Now, the other thing that comes into play here is if you've got debt. So that's why some of these questions are complicated and you have to kind of work one individual at a time. But if you've got debt right now, I definitely wouldn't be setting aside money in an IRA or something like that. Not even into the savings account, anything beyond maybe a month's worth of expenses. But be attacking that debt or trying to avoid any additional debt, student loans and that sort of thing, so that you can be your circle. Remember that shadow. Make sure that's as small as possible when you get out of college, and then have a plan to attack it as soon as you're out. All right. Now, after college, after you start, you're on that track. You've eliminated your debt and you're working. You really do need to sit down with somebody who can help you plan these retirement things, these 401ks, these IRAs, and so forth. And I could get into some of the details of what those are. But the bottom line is the government allows you to set aside money on a regular basis that is what's called tax deferred. You don't pay any taxes on that money until you take it out later on in retirement. And that's a pretty sweet deal. And then there's other options where you can pay your taxes now and not pay them later. So without getting too complicated, I would say this. Find a person. There it is. Find a person that you can go to who knows these things when it's that time in your life. And the card that I'm holding in my hand, Dr. Ashburn may recognize, it's her son's business card. He's a wealth management advisor. If you'd like this card, you can come see me later and talk to him or talk to Dr. Ashburn. People like that exist, and they would love to sit down with you, and it doesn't cost you anything to go talk to them and set up something with them. All right, they'll get their fees later as you start accumulating your wealth. So that's what I would do. As a college student, wait, save, get in the habit, get a plan, and then know in your mind that you're going to start as soon as you get that full-time position, as soon as especially when you're out of debt, you'll really start attacking that as rapidly as possible. I'm going to pause for a second, see if any questions from the floor that you want to ask very quickly. I don't want to take too much time waiting. Any questions that you want to know? What is that word that you said, and what did you mean by that? Anything like that, or what should I do in this situation? Anybody? Yes.
What options are there for people that are older, that are starting? Is it hopeless, or
No.
is there a chance for a good retirement?
Absolutely. I would say you probably do want to sit down with somebody, a financial counselor and an advisor, and come up with some options. And every plan is based on the variables in your life. And I don't want to ask you those variables right now because it would involve, is there debt, what kind of debt, what are the income levels, and those sorts of things. It is never hopeless. There are ways to accumulate wealth. It's going to be a larger amount you've got to set aside, like we saw. In fact, every 10 years you've waited, you've got to double that amount that you need to set aside. Okay? Now, the advantage of being a little older than the other students is that your retirement age and the ability to qualify for Social Security is a lower age than they're going to get when they get to that point. So that's something to look forward to. That's kind of nice. Sorry, guys, Social Security probably won't be around when a lot of you get there. So don't count on it. Don't have the blinders on saying, I'll just live off Social Security, because it may not be there. You have no control over that. And of course, you don't have control over any of the things we're talking about, but you can plan well. You follow God's principles, and He will bless and He'll provide, Matthew 6. So yes, there's hope. But I'd say it's got to be something personal with an advisor like Zach or somebody. Yes?
A lot of us are going into the ministry, so we don't have a lot of income. So we are getting rid of our debt snowball and providing an emergency fund and stuff like that. And setting aside a retirement fund. So what's the first thing that you would suggest to do by going about all those three things and such like that?
Doing all of those things? Well, you mentioned the debt snowball. Yeah. If you're not familiar with what that is, you take your smallest debts and you attack that first. Everything else that you've got, you pay the minimum balance, but you attack your smallest debt with a vengeance. And as Dave Ramsey would call it, with gazelle-like intensity. And the Bible uses that illustration. You run from it like a gazelle would run from a lion, I think is how Solomon puts it. But you attack that with intensity, and you go after that smallest debt, and when it's gone, it might just be a $300 debt. You attack it, and maybe it only takes you 2 months to get out of that. But then whatever it took to get out of that, you apply that to your next smallest debt. And now you're adding that to the minimum payment you're already making, and then when you're finished with that debt, it might take you a year. Then whatever that amount of money is, maybe it's $400 that you were paying on this debt, you roll that into the next debt that you have. So you categorize your debts so that you're attacking the smallest ones first. Don't do what I thought I was supposed to do, that they taught me in finance. In finance, they teach you, in an organizational level, this is probably the case. You attack the things that are of the highest interest. Don't do that from a personal standpoint. There are victories that I can't explain when you attack those small things and check them off and knock them out, and they'll do wonders in your relationship when you're married as well. If you can get rid of those things one thing at a time, and then take those minimum payments, apply it to the next one until snowball means it gets bigger and bigger as it rolls down the hill. That's exactly what you're doing, so that when you get to the very bottom, you wipe out that last debt very quickly. And then you get to do a happy dance and lots of other things. Then that money that you've been using, that big, huge snowball, now you're in a habit of setting that much money aside every month. So now what do? IRAs and investment accounts and portfolios where you get an advisor and you set that up, and then that money starts accumulating using these compounded interest properties that makes that grow and explode in ways that are hard for us to even think about. Does that make sense? Did I answer everything that you asked?
Yeah.
So,
What about an emergency fund?
The Ramsey plan would be $1,000 first, and then you do the debt snowball. Make sure you always have $1,000. There's no science to that. That's not inspired. I would say $1,000 minimum. I think sometimes a month's worth of savings, so that if you are out of work for 30 days, you can deal with that. So maybe $3,000, something like that. But whatever it is, come up with a plan and say, I'm going to get this first and then attack my debt. But you do want a savings account. You want some kind of emergency fund. You know why? Because if you don't have that, and you start attacking debt, something's going to happen over here. Your car's going to break down, and you're going to be like, I'm going to have to swipe that on the credit card because I put all my cash on my debt. And so you get back in this vicious cycle. In fact, again, this can't be explained, but as Ramsey calls it, Murphy's Law, he says the emergency fund is Murphy antidote or whatever, I forget, but it's like prevention. It's like it keeps Murphy's Law away because you've got an emergency fund. There's just something that happens when you've got money set aside and you don't even use it. You don't touch it. It gives a comfort, and it helps you make better decisions with your money. So I would do that first, $1,000 to $3,000, then attack your debt, and then start using that momentum you've got to start investing. And you can do that on a ministry salary, even a starting ministry salary. You can do that if you plan well, cost as low as possible. Don't commit to things without a plan. Have a plan for every dollar next month because you've tracked every dollar last month and you know what kind of things are required, what kind of things you can change. Other questions? Yes? That's a really good point. When I was in college again, I was an accounting major and I should have known better, but the money was easy to get when you went and just signed that piece of paper and they deposited money in your account. All right? That's so dangerous. And it's easy for us to think, well, I'm going to be making money one day and it'll be easy for me to pay this off. It just doesn't work that way. I thought that very same thing, and it did not work that way. It took me years to get out from under it. And it made the first years of marriage very difficult because it still was following me around, even though I waited many years to get married. So don't fall into that, and keep those as low as possible. Make sacrifices. Don't live it up right now. Okay, this is not the time to live it up if you're borrowing to do that. Make sacrifices, beans and rice, ramen, grilled cheese with the iron, ketchup packets from McDonald's, make great spaghetti sauce. There's lots of ways to do that, okay? Okay. Yes, I did. It's okay. You survive. All right? Before we run out of time, let me touch on something else that I kind of started with the illustration of the pastor. Listen, guys especially, the Bible says you're at the level of an infidel if you don't care for those that He has entrusted you with. You care for your own. You have a responsibility. And one day as husbands and wives, you're going to have a responsibility to care for your kids. Don't neglect that. That is a spiritual matter, in my opinion. And in fact, I think I can support it with Scripture. You have a responsibility to care for them. You save, you plan, you budget, and you buy life insurance. There's not a verse that tells you to buy life insurance, but let me tell you, I think it's foolish to have a family, especially if you have kids, and not have life insurance of some type. It's way more affordable than you think. When I bought life insurance, when we first got married and we knew we were going to have a family soon, we bought $700,000 worth of life insurance for $30 a month. That's giving up a soda a day or whatever it is you need to give up. $30 a month. You can find that once you're employed. Maybe it's hard to find it right now, but when you get to that stage in life, find a way to get good term life insurance. Avoid whole life. Avoid all those other policies they're going to try to sell you. And there's a tip, by the way. Don't let people sell you this stuff. Don't let people sell you investments and life insurance. You buy those things. You see the difference? When I go buy it, I'm doing the research myself and I make a decision based on what I've read from objective sources. When people sell you something, it sounds really great, but guess why they're selling it? Their commissions are higher with those products. Okay? That's bad for you because that means it's costing you more. So trust me, we can do the math all day long. Buy term life insurance. Buy it for what you need. $700,000 that seems too big. But if you do the math, and if I would have died early on and had kids to take care of, or if my wife and I both were gone, that would have been enough to take care of them and take care of the people who were going to have to take care of them. But it was only $30 a month. Okay? You'd be surprised how much you can afford. And at a minimum, you ought to do that very early on. Going in the ministry, buy life insurance. Spend that $30 a month or maybe $20 a month. Depending on how young and how healthy you are, it could be a lot cheaper than that. Okay? I was almost 30 when I bought it at that price. So in your 20s, you'll buy it much cheaper. Any other questions real quick? We've got like 30 seconds. Yes, ma'am.
Rent or buy?
I made a terrible mistake right after college to buy a house. I had my job. Everybody, all the math said you buy because you're wasting money, you're throwing it away when you rent. But I had nothing to put down. And guess what? I had nothing to put down. I also had nothing on hand to fix the furnace. And so when the old oil furnace that the guy promised me was new and somewhat, I found out it was really old and it was in terrible shape because he lied and that people do that. Guess how I paid for the new furnace? A loan. Line of credit on my house. Because the bank said, oh, we can just give you a line of credit. I was like, okay. I need to buy an engagement ring too. Okay. All right. It's easy. Please learn from those mistakes. But I bought a house because again, I heard the old adage that rent is wasting money, you're flushing it down the toilet because you'll never get it back. But there's something about not having that burden hanging over you when you have no savings. And when you own a house, you've got this huge thing hanging over you. A roof could go bad, furnace could go bad, all your appliances, lots of things can happen. All right? Now, try to get to a point where you can then buy. So you start saving until you get about a 15% or 20% down payment and still have some savings aside. Then you go and buy a house and you try to get a 15-year mortgage, not a 30, or a 20-year mortgage instead of a 30 and that sort of thing. Does that make sense? So yes, I would say right after school, unless you're just blessed with some kind of huge inheritance or something, you probably want to rent for a while. Okay? That's not absolute. Some people turn out fantastic by buying early, and that's great. I just wouldn't recommend it until you have a really good plan in place. All right, I think I'm past my time, and we also have an announcement they said, so I'm going to close this in prayer. I'm going to email you the rest of these points so you can read through them, look at the verse, look at the principles, and please, please, please ask people questions. Get advice. Get those people in your life speaking to you so that you can not try to navigate this on your own, but really move forward with wisdom. Father, thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for sharing it with us through your word and through your people and through your spirit. I pray that we'll listen and that we'll please you in all that we do. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.